engineering in the UK in rail interest group sessions. We hold our sessions twinned with the InCOSE Transportation Working Group and APTA in the US. So anyone who's joining us from the US or wider, very welcome. Thank you for joining. And thank you for Dale in the US for arranging the IT for us. Today's session is being presented by Adrian Thorne and Tracy Best, both of whom are enterprise architects. Is that the best way of describing you?
Well, I'm an enterprise architect. Tracy, you're
all singing
and dancing.
All right. How about that? And both from working in Network Rail at the minute, and I'm probably going to let them introduce themselves because they can do a better job of it than me. If you're happy, Adrian, I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, hopefully everybody can see me on the online. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak here on this Rail Interest Group meeting. So my name is Adrian Thorne. Tracy Best is sitting to the left of me. It's worth saying that sort of like both of us have sort of been on a bit of a journey over the last 10 years, I suppose. Me slightly less. I've been working on this for the last 5 years, but what you're going to see today is sort of like where we've got to in basically trying to, I suppose, understand how to or establish a methodology to integrate the railway better, especially when we are dealing with large, complex, enhancement programs. So this is really a sort of like where we've got to. I think there's probably more improvements we can make. There's more we can do with this, but hopefully this will give you an idea of actually what systems engineering can really do when you sort of embrace more of it. So we're entitled How Systems Engineering Can Help Bridge the Gap Between Strategy and Delivery in Rail. And so the backdrop of this is that in the UK, probably internationally, we do deliver quite a lot of large rail enhancement schemes. They're quite big, they're quite expensive. There's a lot you need to think about in terms of pulling those together. This is quite an apt picture because it's a test train for sort of the digital railway, which is kind of where all this thinking started on digital railway and Network Rail about 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's about 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I think it kicked off earlier than that, and that was digital railway. It was more than signalling and ETCS at the time. It was all about if you could start again with a blank sheet of paper, what would the digital railway of the future look like?
Yeah.
And it covered all capabilities within the rail industry at that time.
So that's where this has all started. It's worth just sort of starting off and saying railway is a complex beast. So you've got a complex network across the UK. Internationally, across all other countries, that you've got complex networks, lots of interfaces with lots of different parts of the railway, also with external connectivity with other transport systems and other wider things as well. In the centre there, we've got also a complex stakeholder landscape. This is a view that there's a company called Visual Meaning that we got to do us a view of what the sort of ecosystem for rail looks like. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of layers to it, and there's a lot of things going on. So, you've got that to deal with. And then on the right there, that's just basically a depiction of you've got lots of dependencies on other programs that are working both in rail and also other transport programs and other things going on at the same time. So you've got quite a complex landscape that you're trying to deal with when delivering large enhancements. You're also building on top of, in the UK at least, a 200-year-old legacy. So there's a lot of stuff that still exists from Victorian times that you're having to deal with. If you'd have built a railway today, you probably wouldn't have started where the Victorians started, but that's what you've got, and you've got quite a lot of technical debt to deal with that as well. Virtual Biscuit, for anybody who can tell me where that station is. I might tell you at the end if somebody can do it, but it's somewhere in the UK. No. Well, I'll come back to that later. So the other thing to also remember is that these big enhancement programs are delivered over quite a large number of years, and in those number of years, you've got governments moving around, you've got society changing, you've got economies moving, around. There's a lot of churn and change. You've got technology advancing while you're building this thing. You might have legal and regulatory change. We all know, whether you believe in climate change or not, in the UK at least, we have weather, and that has an issue, makes problems as well. So all of this stuff is going to happen over the period of your programs, and is going to add another complication to what you're trying to do and trying to put all this stuff together. So it's really, it's just another thing that you've got to worry about. And then, although we like to think that actually the railway is a standardised, very set in its ways system, actually there's a lot of organisational cultures, capabilities, and language across the railway. We've got glossaries, we've got standards, we've got values, but how each of the organisations in that ecosystem deal with those values can be quite different. So recognising that and being able to deal with those different, the different language and different cultures is quite key to ensuring a coherent, integrated railway. So, given all that complexity, if you were to build a railway, we've got a Lego picture here. Without a picture, could you actually go away and do that? And this is I suppose the issue that we kind of have been trying to address is to say, actually, without understanding what the picture on the box is, trying to actually integrate a railway, build a railway, and pull it together is actually quite a difficult thing. And quite often, when we start off our programs, if we get the picture, that's useful. Sometimes the picture's incomplete. Sometimes the picture's not quite all fits together. So getting this right at the start, getting an understanding of where we're trying to get to is really quite key. So how do we keep line of sight to our strategic objectives? So I think you had a presentation back in February by Nigel Harris, Dr. Nigel Harris, Professor Nigel Harris. Yes, and he said that one of the key sort of recommendations that he made is that throughout your life cycle, keeping a line of sight to what the strategic objectives are, what you're actually trying to achieve, is really key. And that's kind of what we're trying to. The solution we've come up with is trying to really do is make sure that we've got that line of sight from the requirements and the design that you put down on the sort of infrastructure or the rolling stock or the technical level, all the way back to why are you actually trying to do this in the first place, is actually really key to ensure that you deliver the benefits for the communities and the customers that actually use the railway. And then also, how do we assure continuity and integrity across with all this change going on throughout the life cycle? And there's going to be a lot of churn, and you need something to be able to baseline to be able to sort of then impact change against. So having that baseline, having that understanding of where you're trying to get to and how that's changing over time is also really key. And actually, system engineering has got a lot of tools that can help us do this, but I don't know that we use all of them. And this is kind of hopefully will remind you of some of the tools that you already use, probably add a few new ones that you might not have seen exist, to actually try and help solve this problem. So first of all, we put this up here just to before we go into the sort of the systems engineering side of things and the sort of the service integration bit, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I think it's worth just saying that what I'm going to talk about today isn't a panacea. Systems engineering doesn't work in a silo. It operates alongside your portfolio or project management, program management. That needs to be integrated against the solution that you're trying to achieve, trying to deliver. And also you've got funding lines, you've got supply chains, and you've got procurement that needs to be aligned with what you're trying to achieve as well. So these things all need to, these disciplines, these areas all need to work together in order to achieve an integrated outcome for your customers. So just really making sure that we systems engineering is great and it has lots of tools, but we also need to think about who we partner with, how we collaborate with some of the other disciplines to make it a success. So in that last slide, I talked about service integration. Now, I know quite a lot in systems engineering world, you talk about the railway as a system, and you are right, it is a system. It's but I like to think of it as a service. Why do I think of it as a service? Well, it recognizes that we actually provide a service to customers. That's actually quite key, because it's not just a system that does its thing, it actually provides value to our customers. And I think thinking at it like that makes you start to think about the railway much more holistically, because you realize that your infrastructure, your rolling stock, your operations, your customer facing sort of customer experience people, all that kind of stuff needs to work together in order to deliver the end service. You can't just think about one of those things in isolation. So service really makes you think about the system as a whole rather than just bits and pieces. The other thing is, thinking about it as a service makes you think about the line of sight from why the change is actually needed. So, what is it you're doing for your customers? What is it you're doing for the society, for the communities that you are delivering to? So, service integration, same as system integration, but customer focused. If anything you take away from today, that's a cool thing to think of the railway as. So, I mentioned earlier that we apply systems engineering sort of methods to this. Quite a lot of the time we focus in engineering in this space over here. You've got your systems engineering technical processes and your management processes. That all lives over here. But actually, once you get into the strategic space, you do what I do, which is the enterprise architecture stuff. But that is actually also part of the InCOSE methodology as well. If you look into CBOC, there's a thing called enterprise systems engineering, which is actually a combination of both enterprise approaches, methods, and systems engineering methods. Things like enterprise analysis and evaluation, that's basically you're looking at your enterprise, you're looking at your railway today and understand how it's delivering, how it's performing, and therefore what do you need to change to improve it. Visioneering, what's the world look like when I've changed it? Enterprise architecture, how can we model what we're doing at an enterprise level rather than just at a systems level? So enterprise modeling or enterprise architecture is thinking about it at an organizational level, at a holistic level, rather than just at a systems level. And then capability-based planning, which I'll talk about in a bit, which is really about sort of starting off with, before you even think about solutions and, I'm going to do this intervention and I'm going to change this bit over here and, full track this and do that, and understanding what capabilities you need in order to deliver the value to your customer actually is a really useful first step to understanding what your solution might be and what your customers need from the railway, or what your community need from the railway. So what we pulled together is actually in delivering this this work that we've done is actually a combination of both systems engineering tools and techniques and enterprise architecture techniques, and sort of applying them under the sort of enterprise systems engineering approach. So I do sort of suggest that, if you've not come across enterprise systems engineering, go and have a look at it, because it's quite an interesting field that it's only been going for a few years, but it takes into account that wider sort of soft systems world and the hard systems world, starts to sort of draw it together. And this certainly helps with what we're trying to do in terms of, developing that line of sight from strategy through to the actual hard railway. So the approach is really quite simple, actually. First of all, we actually figure out what is the target state, where are we trying to get to, and we can sort of visioneer what that might look like. We can understand what benefits we need to achieve, what outcomes we need to achieve, and that will exist at some stage in the future. So that could be 2050, 2060, or whenever we want that to be. And then we go right back to the start and we say, well, where are we today? So that's that evaluation piece of looking at the railway as it exists today. How does it operate? What are its issues? What are the dependencies that we need to consider before we actually start work on building this thing? then we once we've got our starting point, we can then go through and sort of plan out what our roadmap is to get from the world as it looks like today to our desired target state in the future. And it's worth just saying that target state isn't a fixed thing. You know, you don't define this and then walk away and then start building. This might actually change as you start to iterate, as you start to move through the life cycle. You might realize that certain things are not possible, that certain dependencies aren't actually achieved, and therefore you have to sort of redefine where you're going. So this target state is, you define it because it gives you a direction to go in, but you always must realize that throughout the life cycle that will shift as the world changes around you, particularly if you're delivering over quite a long number of years. So defining the target state. Why do you need a target state? So basically it's a general term that people use to basically define what the system looks like, what the system you want to have looks like. The system could be sort of organisation, product or service. In our case, it's a railway service, and we are defining what that future target state looks like. Excuse me, I'll just give you a bit of water. Why do you need one? Basically, it enables you to establish strategic alignment. So, you know, again, you're delivering the railway for a purpose. What is that purpose? It's that strategic goal that you're trying to get to. So having a target state gives you an understanding of where that strategic alignment is. Gives you a clear vision. So as organisations, you know, are going to be involved in all this, having a vision that everybody can share, that everybody understands about what the world's going to look like when this is done. That's absolutely part of the target state. Building a target state as well also enables you to sort of work out operational efficiency. So you might build a target state and actually start to think, you know, things aren't quite so efficient. So you can optimize your target state for what you need. So it enables you to do that. It enables you to adapt and adapt to changes that are going on over time. So it's something you can actually test, you know, changes or impact risk and opportunities and change against. And basically, it's the foundation for program execution. So, you know, you're going to be delivering stuff over time. This is the direction that you're trying to go to. So target state is absolutely key. There's a good thing down here. This was a statement that was made to me halfway through my career. So I used to be, for a period of my career, I used to be a transition manager, standing on the sort of edge of, you know, project and on operations. So I was the person who had to get a new capability over the line. Didn't do it in rail. I did it in a completely different world. But one of the things that really became obvious to me was the fact that when you're standing at the end there, trying to sort of enter this thing that's been being built over the last however many months or years into service, you really does focus your mind on what went before and what sort of stuff you have to deal with in order to do that. And it's really sort of focused my mind as an enterprise architect these days to actually, you know, start with the end in mind, think about what that future is, really try and understand that before we start off, so that when you do hand over to that person who's entering service, they don't get the slight nightmare that I went through when I did the job. So I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to sort of just say that actually with this work, there's nothing completely new in this. You know, this is the systems engineering V model, but quite often we start down here. So we start off with system requirements definition. Actually, we start up here. So I will be talking about, as we go through this, actually the importance of doing business mission and analysis, really understanding what your strategic intent is, what your vision is, where you're trying to get to. Once you have an understanding of that, you can then start to understand what your stakeholders and your customers need. So doing that stakeholder needs definition off the back of what your mission analysis is also a key step that you need to do. And hopefully at the bottom of that, you'll then get a set of requirements that you can then start doing your system requirements definition and your development off the bottom of that. And that will take you back around the, take you around the V. Key thing about this as well is that obviously you can then validate your operational system against what your mission is, and what your stakeholders want. So that's a key aspect of this. So what we've done is basically put together like a meta model that enables us to sort of pull together all the different bits of the target state. So right at the start, you're doing your mission analysis, which is deciding a set of strategic objectives. So what's policy? What does government want us to do? Or what does our organisation, what does Network Rail want? What does the TOCs want from a strategic perspective? So understanding your strategic objectives is a key step you need to take. We then need to produce a vision. So that's the thing that everybody's going to take forward. That's the thing that everybody wants to get behind in order to deliver the railway. Again, this might change over time as things happen, but this is your kind of starting point as to what it is you want to deliver. You then need to sort of look at what we're actually delivering into. So understanding, you might not know what the solution is, you might not know what routes or stations or depots that you need to have, but you must have some sort of an idea of the system of interest, the region that you're delivering this into, and what their particular needs and wants are in that particular region in association with those strategic objectives. You also need to have at this point, look at who your stakeholders are, because you're going to need to figure out what they want in the next step. So actually sitting down and actually working out what your stakeholders are at this level is really key. This is kind of the first step of your target state. Gives you a real top layer view of what it is you're trying to achieve, what the world looks like when you've achieved it in broad terms, and the sort of very high level system of interest that you are delivering into, and who your key stakeholders are. And they can be both positive stakeholders who will benefit from this, but also stakeholders who don't benefit from this. And you'll also have supporters and dejectors. And you need to make sure that you capture all of those and you understand what their wants and needs are, so that you can deal with whatever they're going to throw at you as you move forward. So in doing this, I put along the bottom of the next few slides actually some of the methods that we apply at this point. So I talked about mission analysis. Visioneering is an enterprise architecture tool. Just basically defines what the world looks like in the future. Some people do it really well, some people don't do it very well, but it's actually a really important sort of step in understanding what your strategic intent is. Systems thinking helps you understand the system and what's in it, what you're going to need to think about as you start building out your solution. And stakeholder mapping: who is it that I'm going to need to deal with in delivering this? Who's going to benefit? Who's not going to benefit? It's really key. Next step. So this is still in business mission analysis. Now looking at outcomes and benefits. So you understand what your strategic objectives are. Now looking at, well, okay then, so based on those objectives, what outcome do you want to achieve? You know what your vision is. What's the outcome? What benefits are going to be realised through delivering that outcome? And they will quite often, from in the UK, those will quite often be monetary, economic uplift, but they also could be rail reform. They could be anything really, but fundamentally, again, this is part and parcel of what your strategic intent is, where you're trying to get to, the value of what it is that you're trying to deliver. And this also helps you justify why you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, particularly in the UK to ministers and the people with the money. Through this stage, when you're working on that, you might start to develop your system of interest a bit further, maybe understand what your wider system of interest is, and you're also starting to really get to know who your stakeholders are, maybe starting to meet them and talk to them about what their needs are. So you're starting to sort of eke into that sort of stakeholder analysis piece. And in this session, in this step, we're looking at outcomes profiling. So this is something that in the UK, there's a group called NISTA who, defines kind of like the standard for how we do this kind of stuff at the sort of policy level. So they have this idea of outcomes profiling, which basically says, how do you it basically tells you how to develop a line of sight from your outcomes and benefits back up to your strategic objectives. And in the next step, when we start talking about outputs, which I know is something that we quite often talk about in rail, having that line of sight from the output that you want to see in the railway back up to your strategic objectives through your outcomes and benefits is a key part of the outcomes profiling. And also benefits mapping, so understanding, how does all of this deliver value? That provides the basis for justification for what it is you're trying to deliver. So outcomes profiling, this is a bit of an example of how it works. So you have your mission at the top, so government will have a set of missions. You'll then have a set of strategic priorities. So in our case, the Department for Transport has a set of strategic priorities. Maybe actually Network Rail has its own strategic priorities that it needs to have as well. But understanding this is quite key. Then from those priorities, you define your strategic objectives, outcomes and benefits, and then at the bottom, you have your customer needs. So that's kind of the outcomes profile, or what we call the gold thread that drives what it is you're delivering and how it relates back to what your government or organisational mission is. It's quite a useful tool. Bit of an example of a benefits map. The way I like to look at these are basically driver, mission, objectives, benefit of those objectives, then how you turn those into outcomes and outputs. And you can look at this in both directions. So if you're a strategic person, you can look at it in that direction. If you're a program manager who's thinking about delivering something, you can look at it in that direction, and it kind of helps you understand, the value of what you're delivering and what you're trying to get to. So the third step is where you actually start doing the stakeholder needs definition. So down here, you're now starting to think what your customer needs are. So, and this is where we start to get into the outputs world. So we're talking about, what do they want to, do they need more trains? Do they need faster trains? Do they need better access? Do they need, better quality of the railway in terms of conditions such as, noise and all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of different customer needs that you might collect off the back of your outcomes and benefits, and there needs to be obviously these customer needs need to be based in what your mission and what your outcomes and benefits will be. The other step of this is I mentioned earlier, capability-based planning. So here you're now thinking about, right, okay, so this is what my customer needs. What are the capabilities in the railway do I need in order to achieve those deliver those customer needs? So we're not thinking here about, I need some extra track or all that kind of stuff. You're saying, right, do I need more trains? Do I need, a different, an automated digital signalling system? Do I need, level boarding or level access to my stations and all that kind of stuff? So here you're actually starting to look at not the solution, but what are the basic capabilities that you're going to need across the railway in order to achieve deliver those customer needs. And the great thing is, once you define that capability, that actually helps you start to put some real bones on your system of interest. So you're now starting to get into maybe a system of systems view, which gives you a start to give you a concept design of what your railway might look, but what your solution might look like. You're still not quite in solution; you're still in concept level, but you're you're thinking about the railway in a bit more detail now, and how it, and how those capabilities might be, might manifest into the system. And again, you might be talking to your stakeholders, where you're going to be talking to your stakeholders, understanding your stakeholders a bit more in order to understand your customer needs. So at this step, stakeholder needs analysis again. Capability-based planning I mentioned earlier, to basically understand, well, what's the capability the railway needs to have in order to achieve those. You might start to use at this point modelling tools like enterprise architecture modelling, or even MBSE at this stage. Model-based systems engineering is a modelling approach. So you may start to sort of work some of this out, and certainly I use modelling techniques to try and map all this out and develop the relationships between all of these different things, so I can see how they interact with each other. And if you change a capability in there, what does it have? What does it do to your customer needs? Or if you change if you take something away from your system of interest, what does that do? You can start, if you model some of this, you can start to really understand what the what the impact of making a change or something, or some dependency being taken away or something like that will achieve. And then one of the key aspects of this step is actually, this is where the output of this might be a system concept definition. So it's not a system definition. You haven't got a solution yet. You've got a concept. You've got an understanding of what you're trying to achieve. What capabilities you need. You've got a reasonably good idea of what your system might look like, or at least a system of systems might look like. You've got a really good handle on your stakeholders, and that kind of gives you your overarching system concept definition, which is the building blocks of what we consider to be the target state. So capability-based planning basically ensures that changes are aligned to the overarching strategic vision. So again, you're looking at the railway from a capabilities level. It describes what the business does, not what it doesn't. It's not the solution. What does the business do? What does the railway do in order to deliver those customer needs? It needs to encompass people, process, and products. So we're not just thinking about railway technical systems. We need to think about how are people going to use it or operate it. What processes are going to be applied, whether those processes are manual, done by people, or automated through the systems that you're using. But understanding it from a holistic people, process, and products perspective is actually quite key. And the steps that you go through is basically identify what your capabilities are, assess those capabilities. So have I got those capabilities? Do I need to build new ones? Do I need to uplift those capabilities? What do I need to do to them? You then need to prioritize. So, you might decide that, oh my God, if I have to change all this stuff in order to deliver this customer need, that might be quite expensive. So you might decide, actually, you need to cut your cloth accordingly, in which case, prioritization of those capabilities and where you're going to focus your money and how that's going to affect your benefits is quite key. And then, of course, off the back of that, you then start to get into plan how you're going to then go and, you're starting to plan out how you're going to go and deliver those capability uplifts. So this is something that we produced with East West Rail. This is a part of what we produced actually when we were working with East West Rail a few years ago. It's effectively what we've called a customer-centric rail service model. It basically, we looked at TRIFO. I know your TRIFO in the UK is timetable, rolling stock, infrastructure, franchise, and operations. And we decided that doesn't really tell you much about what you need to change, what your capabilities are. So we built this, which is basically this was built from about 800 years worth of experience, talking to operators, talking to infrastructure managers, talking to system owners, all the different aspects of the railway to really try and understand what does it take to run a railway. We came up with this model, which kind of gives you, it's just a concept, which basically gives you a sort of like an overarching view of, all the bits and pieces, all the building blocks that you need to deliver a railway. And fundamentally, you've got customer experience at the top. In the middle, you've got all your operational bits and pieces, and at the bottom, you've got all of your infrastructure. And you kind of can imagine this almost like a bit of a value chain from the customer all the way down to the infrastructure that you're delivering. All of it's really important. So don't think just because I put infrastructure at the bottom that infrastructure isn't important. It's fundamentally important because it's at the bottom. It just means that we need to think about all of this stuff to understand how our railway needs to change to deliver against its mission and its customer needs. I won't elaborate on that. There are some words on here that we've kind of used around sustainability. We kind of came up with that as a catch-all for all the different qualities that you need in the railway in order to deliver. So things like safety, well-being, inclusion, security, health, environment, sustainability, and social value. All of those things sort of do need to be applied across the whole set of capabilities. So this kind of gives you a view of what capabilities you need to think about and which ones you might want to change in order to deliver the mission that you've been set. So at the end of this, as I said, you get a target state or a system concept definition, which includes all of these different elements. And as I said, if you use MBSE or an enterprise architecture approach, you can actually sort of start to draw all these together and see how they interact. And when you do make a change, you can sort of understand how that change will affect your what you're delivering, and whether it's going to whether you're going to have to go back to your lords and masters and say, yeah, actually, it's going to affect your strategic objectives. What do you want to do? Or maybe this is going to be more costly. Are we going to take something out? What's that going to do to your overall benefit profile and all that kind of stuff? So actually mapping all this out and joining all this up is actually a useful tool to understanding impact of change, risk, and opportunities. Once you've got your target state, as you saw in that previous earlier diagram, there's a roadmap. You need to build a roadmap from start to finish. So we set that out. We do have to come back. This is where, right at the start, I had that sort of 3 cheese model of the service integration, portfolio integration, and commercial integration. You do need to sort of work with those guys to figure out what that roadmap might look like, because it will depend on, not just the system you're trying to build, but also the feasibility of the delivery, and also your supply chain and the capabilities it's got and how it's going to how that's going to work. So it's a road mapping is a collaborative thing. Can't be done in one silo. It needs to be done across the whole lot. And if you get it right, you get regular benefits realization, and you can balance both technical delivery and commercial risk across the whole thing. That's the kind of panacea. That's the what you're trying to get to. I know it's not quite as easy as that, but that's your kind of your target you're trying to get to is a nice cost flow benefits realization throughout. So you've got that structure. To achieve that, you would do some technical partitioning. So how are we going to partition the problem up? We need to do benefits realization planning. So this is where we figure out, how are we actually going to release benefits over time. We might have to do some financial planning. So what's it going to cost? Are we going to sort of have lots of, is it going to be cheap early and really expensive later, or how's that going to work out? So we need to understand what our cost flow is going to look like. And then we also need to work with our delivery partners, our portfolio program managers, to actually help them put together a delivery plan that's going to then deliver this. So that's just going back to really going full circle. You've got your target state. You've got to define your as is. You've now got your roadmap. That should give you the starting point for then giving you a good foundation for delivering and integrating your railway over time. Recognising that will change, but you've got something now that you can impact that change against. So we're just coming towards the end of this. I just wanted to sort of put up here a bit of how this has evolved over time. So Tracy's been on this for 10 to 15 years on this, and has kind of started the ball rolling with these guys down here. So I will say this wrong, but Umiliati, Bhatia, Brownlee and Brown, they were your enterprise architecture team, weren't they, back in the day on digital rail? They kind of came up with this initial what they called an ontologically based sort of structure to help understand and model your railway. And we kind of started off with their ideas and developed them from there when we were at East West Rail. East West Rail then took that and managed to sort of produce that line of sight from their strategic intent, their vision, all the way down to design. So you could you could see how that worked. And then now Tracy and I and a small but perfectly formed team are working with Northern Powerhouse Railway, trying to apply these concepts to the Northern Powerhouse Rail problem challenge, and finding it works. But it's a much bigger problem than East West Rail, all the digital rail problems. So it's a challenge, but the concepts are sound. So in conclusion, we've got a proven systematic approach. It's based in best practice. It applies a combination of enterprise architecture and systems engineering. So if you go back to as I said, after this, if you're going to have a look at enterprise systems engineering, you'll see that is a thing, and it actually does bring together the whole world of enterprise thinking and systems engineering together to help you sort of glue together that world of strategy and delivering real things on the ground. You get a common vision that's focused on customer needs, because you've done that customer needs analysis, and it's the basis for system validation and assurance. So it's not about have you followed the right process, but if you want to know, have I delivered the right thing at the end of this, this is the basis for testing against, or for validating your operational railway that you get at the end of this, that hopefully reflects the vision and the strategic objectives that you've set out in the first place. And it's a framework for informed decision making. So throughout this life cycle, it's building a railway takes a long time. Change is going to hit you. You're going to need to make decisions based on new information, new things happening. Risks are going to hit you. Opportunities are going to come up. You might want to take those opportunities. You've got a basis to be able to impact all of that onto your target state, onto the world onto the model that you've created. So that you can help decision makers make the right decisions, so that they really do understand the impact of change and what that's going to do. And that's me.